I can't tell you how often I hear phrases to the effect of everything in life boils down to sex. And agree with this statement or not, many people hold it to be true. And when you take a look at the world around you, it's really not hard to see why. But regardless of whether or not everything in life really does boil down to sex, thinking about sex all the time can really start to get in the way of other aspects of life. So in this video, we'll take a look at the ultimate hacks to get sex off your mind. First off, if you find yourself thinking about sex more than just about everything else, you're not strange. As a species, we are absolutely obsessed with sex. I mean, from a biological level, it makes perfect sense. Without sex, none of us would be here. Every cell in our body is designed to usher us to procreate. Otherwise, nature would lose its function. Even many of us who have no desire to procreate and have kids whatsoever find themselves submerged in the human obsession with sex. For most people, sex feels good. At least it should, otherwise I'd have some serious questions about why you're doing it. But beyond that, sex also goes a long way in informing how we feel about ourselves. For a lot of people, their sex lives cast a major reflection on how they are perceived by both themselves and others. Repeated sexual rejection and frustration can lead to some seriously negative emotional consequences if not dealt with properly, leading people to feel self-conscious, lonely, or even bitter. Now, all of this hardly comes as a surprise when our media industry fuels our cultural obsession with sex more and more each day. Everywhere we look, we are presented with sex. From outwardly provocative models on Instagram and just about every Hollywood film featuring at least one romantic or sexual plotline, to more subtle ways that sex permeates facets of our daily lives. Like advertisements constantly using sexual undertones to convince us that becoming more sexually desirable is a good enough reason to buy whatever product they're trying to sell. With the arrival of the internet, sex is only on our minds more and more. In days gone by, no matter how bad you wanted to see a naked woman, to see one, you'd actually have to go out and interact with a woman. Nowadays, all you have to do is pull out your phone and you have a world of instant gratification at your fingertips. With such all-pervasiveness, it's no wonder that some men are turning away from this societal obsession with sex. So, how to get it off your mind? Well, try these tips. Number 1. Chuck out the porn. Especially with the internet at our disposal, many guys find themselves visiting porn sites on a daily basis, with many even owning USBs or hard drives packed with their favorite stash. Yet, as the damaging effects of continued exposure to pornography become more and more apparent, especially among younger generations raised with the internet, a growing number of men are choosing to part ways with pornography. Overexposure to porn from a young age has left a lot of men struggling with issues such as unrealistic expectations for sex, erectile dysfunction, and performance anxiety. If you find yourself constantly thinking about sex, frequenting porn websites or holding onto a stash certainly isn't doing you any favors. The instant gratification that comes from watching porn conditions your brain to view sex as something like an addiction that needs to be satisfied as instantaneously as possible, like a sugar craving that leads to gobbling up the nearest candy available. Teaching your brain to reject these cravings will, over time, decondition that response. When you feel your brain drifting to sex, don't feed that instinct by sticking on porn. Let the thoughts come and go. And watch as over time the impulse to think about sex becomes less of a compulsion and more of a choice. Number 2. Identify your personal triggers. Sigma males are experts at taking a good look in the metaphorical mirror and addressing the parts of themselves that they would like to change and improve. They are experts in self-evaluation and are highly skilled in identifying their trigger points when it comes to behavior or habits that they would like to work on. If you want to change how often you think about sex, it helps to take this leaf out of the Sigma book. Take a good look at the internal and external factors that tend to come into play when you find yourself thinking about sex. Do you find yourself more preoccupied with sex in a particular setting, a particular time of day, when you're in a particular mood or have consumed a particular substance? Monitor your internal and external environment and use this to identify potential trigger points for what causes you to focus too much on sex. If hanging around a certain crowd of people causes you to obsess over sex, perhaps rethink these friendships. If you find that you get fixated on sex whenever you drink alcohol, then perhaps it's better to opt for a non-alcoholic option. Once you identify your trigger points, you can harness this knowledge to avoid them and kick these compulsive thoughts. Number 3. Ask yourself, am I just stressed or bored? A lot of the time, people who come to the realization that they may be thinking about sex too often end up also realizing that a lot of the time, they are in fact just bored or stressed. When we are bored or stressed, our mind likes to drift and wander towards topics that we find distracting or stimulating, and sex is one of the most powerful examples of such a topic. This means that a lot of the time, compulsively thinking about sex is actually nothing more than the brain trying to find a way to cope with stress or boredom. If you find yourself regularly dealing with stress or boredom and are also looking to cut down on the amount of time you spend thinking about sex, take a second to ask yourself if perhaps the two things are related, and you may well find that they are. If this is the case, your task then becomes to look for better, more productive coping mechanisms for the inevitable moments when stress or boredom do surface. Get into some new habits. Try meditation for stress or going for a run if you're bored. Whatever you prefer to do, you can hit two birds with one stone by finding new ways to cope other than thinking about sex. Now, before continuing, please do take a quick second to hit the like button if you're enjoying the video so far. It's a tiny act, but it makes a huge difference in helping me to grow the channel and lets me know what kind of content you guys want to see more of. Thank you guys so much. And finally, number 4, open communication with sexual partners. Many people find themselves struggling with pervasive sexual thoughts as a consequence of poor communication with their sexual partners. Keeping sexual feelings or thoughts bottled up inside can lead them to eat away at us from the inside out. If you're not communicating healthily in terms of your sex life, normal sexual desires may get pushed further and further into the realm of fantasy, and then it may become harder and harder for you to feel satisfied. And when that becomes the case, your brain may begin to compulsively focus on sex to deal with that pesky sense of dissatisfaction you feel eating away at you from the inside. The first advice any intimacy or couples counselor will give you is the old kernel of wisdom: communication is key. And the reason you hear this phrase thrown around so often is because it's true. In order to maintain a healthy sex life and keep intrusive sexual thoughts at bay, you must be open and honest with yourself and approach your partners with healthy communication. Once things are out in the open, you should find them weighing on you a lot less heavily, and any burden of sexual impulse should be kept at bay. Now, to sum up, despite what a lot of the world makes it seem like, sex is not everything. And the Sigma lifestyle displays this perfectly, as they live their lives at the top of their game without needing sexual validation from anybody else. Realizing this and understanding that your self-worth and your value in society exist completely separately from whatever sex you are or are not having is the first step towards freeing yourself from intrusive sexual thoughts. So, using the steps in this video, you can begin to bring yourself to a place where you are more at peace with your sexuality and the amount of time you spend thinking about these kinds of things. So that's all for today's video on how to handle overthinking about sex. I hope you found the video useful, and be sure to check out the rest of the channel for more advice on how to work on yourself the Sigma way and how to truly begin to thrive as a man in today's society. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.